I never planned to return to that old house. But death has a strange way of pulling you back. When Uncle Reginald died, alone, mysterious, and forgotten, it was me who got the call. No other relatives alive, no one else willing. I was the last living bloodline, and thus the sole heir to Greystone Manor. A lawyer with a thinning mustache and cold fingers handed me the keys like they were rusted relics of a buried curse. The house stood alone at the edge of a sleepy village in Yorkshire. 3 stories tall, cloaked in creeping ivy, and crowned with a slate roof that groaned under the weight of time. I hadn't seen it in 20 years, not since that summer I was 7, when I wandered into a hallway that hadn't been there before, and came out with a memory I've tried to forget. I returned now as a man of 30, armed with reason and logic, ready to catalog the estate and perhaps sell it. My boots crunched on gravel as I approached the entrance. The door creaked open before I even touched it, as if the house had been waiting. Inside, everything was coated in dust. Velvet curtains sagged with age. The air was stale, thick with the perfume of mildew and something faintly metallic. The portraits of long-dead ancestors watched with sunken eyes. The floorboards whispered beneath my steps. It wasn't until I reached the 3rd floor that I felt it again, that subtle shift in air pressure, a cold breath on my neck. There, at the end of the hallway, was a door that hadn't been there moments ago. The handle was ornate, brass-shaped like a twisted serpent. I knew that door. That was the door I swore never existed, the forgotten room. I stood paralyzed. My memories came rushing, of a game of hide-and-seek gone wrong, of voices that weren't mine, of a small hand grabbing mine in the dark when I thought I was alone. I turned to leave, but the hallway behind me had changed. The staircase was gone, and the house began to hum. The hum was low at first, barely audible, like the murmur of bees behind drywall. But then it deepened, vibrating through the floorboards, echoing in my ribs. I pressed my hand to the wall for balance and felt it tremble beneath my fingers. The door remained at the end of the hall, solid and silent, but I knew it was watching me. I could feel it. There's a strange kind of sentience to places like this, as if the house itself remembered things no one else should. I reached for my phone. No signal. Of course. Just a draft. Old houses settle, I muttered to no one, trying to talk sense into the rising panic. But even my voice sounded wrong here, swallowed by the walls too quickly. I turned back towards where the stairs should have been, hoping I'd just disoriented myself. But there was only more hallway. Identical doors lined the walls, none of which I recognized. I opened one, expecting a guest room. Instead, I found brick. Each door I tried led to the same thing, solid, rough brick, like the house was sealing itself off behind me, trapping me. I returned to the hallway's end. The serpent-handled door waited. My fingers brushed the handle, cold and too smooth. It turned without resistance. The door creaked open, revealing darkness deeper than any I'd known. My flashlight flickered, then steadied. I stepped in. The room was circular. No windows, no corners. Just a round chamber with high walls and a ceiling that vanished into shadow. At the center stood a child's rocking chair, slowly moving. Back and forth, back and forth. Something had been living here. Toys, ancient, broken ones, lined the edge of the room. A cracked porcelain doll sat slumped against the wall, its eyes painted a milky white. I walked forward, flashlight trembling in my grip. Then I heard it, a whisper. Not from in front of me, from behind the walls. I pressed my ear to the cold plaster. There it was again, whispers, frantic and layered. Dozens of voices, maybe more. Some sobbing, some laughing, some screaming. And one, just one, spoke my name. Elliot! I stumbled back. The door was gone. Panic settled into my bones like frost. The door was gone, vanished as if it had never been carved into the wall. I ran my hands along the cold plaster, searching for a seam, a crack, anything. But there was nothing. Just smooth, uninterrupted wall. I turned back to the center of the room. The rocking chair had stopped. I hadn't heard it stop. I didn't remember it stopping. It just sat there now, motionless and expectant, like a creature waiting to pounce. My flashlight flickered again. I slapped it, desperate to keep the light alive. The darkness here wasn't normal. It felt thick, like it wanted to swallow the beam whole. Something crunched beneath my boot. I looked down and saw a tiny brittle skeleton of a bird. Its wings were broken. Its beak was still open, frozen in a silent cry. I stepped back and my foot hit something soft. Ah, a teddy bear. Its fur was nearly rubbed off, eyes replaced by buttons. One missing. On its belly, stitched in faded red thread, were the words, "Will you play with me?" I dropped it. Then the voices returned. Clearer now. Children, giggling, running. "You're it!" Footsteps echoed through the room, fast, light, circling me though nothing moved. My flashlight spun with my body, trying to catch a glimpse of the owners. But there were no shadows, no shapes, only sound. Thump. Something landed behind me. I turned. Another door had appeared. This one was different, smaller, painted white with a brass knob low to the ground. It looked like it was made for a child. It creaked open on its own. Inside was a tunnel, narrow, barely wide enough to crawl through. My adult body recoiled, but something in me remembered. I had seen that tunnel before. As a child. That summer. That game of hide and seek that never truly ended. And now, I was back in it. A voice, small, distant, yet terrifying in its joy, whispered from inside the tunnel. "Come find me." I fell to my knees, heart pounding, and crawled in. The flashlight began to die, and the door closed behind me. The tunnel closed around me like the throat of some ancient beast. I crawled on hands and knees, the damp wood pressing against my palms, every inch echoing with distant giggles and soft scurrying sounds. My flashlight flickered again, sputtering its dying light as if suffocating in the narrow space. "Stay calm," I whispered. My voice was barely audible, muffled by the close walls. Each breath felt thinner. The air grew colder, staler, like no one had breathed it in decades. I tried not to think of the time I had crawled the same path as a boy. Back then it had felt like a game, a secret passage, an adventure. Now it felt like a grave. Something brushed against my ankle. I jerked and smacked my head on the ceiling of the tunnel. Pain burst behind my eyes. I twisted around, jamming the flashlight toward my feet. But there was nothing. Just the faint sound of breathing that wasn't mine, receding slowly like a predator returning to the shadows. I moved faster. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened into a small chamber, low ceiling with wooden walls warped by moisture and time. A single candle burned in the corner, its flame steady despite the stale air. I hadn't lit it. No one had. On the floor sat a circle of dolls, 8 in total, each one facing inward. Their faces were cracked and painted in strange, exaggerated expressions, grins too wide, eyes too bright. In the center of the circle sat a worn wooden box. Carved into its lid were 3 words. "Do not open." Of course I did. Inside were scraps, child-sized bones, some still wrapped in shreds of faded clothing. Atop them lay a folded note, its paper yellowed and brittle. I unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was childlike, but the message was far too knowing. "We never stopped playing. He said if we stayed quiet, no one would find us. But you came back, Elliot. You remember the rules. You're it now." The candle extinguished on its own. Darkness swallowed everything, and the dolls began to turn their heads. The dolls moved in unison. No strings, no gears, just that slow, unnatural swivel of tiny cracked necks until all 8 stared straight at me. Their painted eyes gleamed, catching light that wasn't there. The silence stretched taut like a wire, until one of them, smaller than the rest with a missing jaw, toppled forward with a hollow clack. That was when the whispering began again. This time it was everywhere. Voices poured from the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Children, always children, chanting in a rhythm that didn't match the beating of my heart. You're it. You're it. You're it. I scrambled away from the doll circle, flashlight long dead now, using only the memory of candlelight to find the edge of the chamber. I felt along the warped wall, hoping for another exit, another tunnel, anything. That's when I heard it, a dragging sound, soft, slow, rhythmic, like bare feet shuffling over wooden boards. Getting closer. I held my breath. My fingers found a crack, a hidden seam in the wall, and I pushed. The panel creaked open, revealing a passage just wide enough to squeeze through. I didn't hesitate. As I slipped inside, I dared a glance back. There, standing just at the edge of the flickering dark, was a figure. Small, childlike, skin pale as wax, no eyes, just dark hollows. It tilted its head, curious, playful, and then smiled. Its teeth were wrong. Too many, too sharp. Then it whispered in a voice I hadn't heard since I was a child. "I've been waiting, Elliot." I slammed the panel shut and ran. The tunnel tilted downward, deeper into the earth beneath the manor. The air grew wetter, fouler, tinged with the smell of rotting paper and old blood. I slipped once, catching myself on splintered boards. My hand came away sticky. And then, suddenly, I fell. The tunnel dropped into open air. I landed hard on stone. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the house anymore. I was in a crypt. The walls were lined with niches, each holding tiny coffins, some no bigger than a shoebox. Faded plaques marked each one, but the names were smudged, as though erased by time or intent. My skin crawled. I stood, trying to calm my breath. That's when I saw it, scratched into the stone above the archway. They never left. The message above the arch burned into my mind. They never left. I stared at it, heart pounding, throat dry. The words looked carved by fingernails, jagged and erratic, each letter uneven and desperate. Behind me, something sighed. I turned fast. Nothing. Just the silence of a room too old to hold the living. The crypt smelled of earth and mildew, yet beneath that was something else, something coppery and thick. Decay, the kind that lingered in your nostrils, clinging to your skin. The air grew colder. My breath fogged, visible even in the dark. Then the whispering returned. This time it wasn't playful. It was pleading. "Help us. He locked the door. We didn't mean to." The voices tumbled over one another, a cacophony of lost children crying through stone. I turned slowly, the beam of my barely working flashlight sweeping the walls. And that's when I saw them. Little handprints, hundreds of them, smeared across the stone, some made in dust, others in something darker. They led toward a sealed door at the far end. Unlike the rest of the crypt, this door was made of wood, thick, blackened, chained shut. The iron links looked ancient, rusted through in places, but still holding tight. Someone had hammered dozens of nails into the seams, as if trying to keep something from getting out. Or in. My name was written across the wood, scratched, carved. Elliot. Over and over. In different sizes, different depths, some recent, some decades old. I stepped closer. My flashlight dimmed further, barely aglow now. My fingers reached out, hesitant. The surface of the door throbbed beneath my touch, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. Then came the knock. 3 slow raps from the other side. Knock, knock, knock. I stumbled back, breath caught in my throat. Silence. And then a voice, impossibly deep and cruel, crawled through the cracks. "Tag, you're it." The chains rattled. The door pulsed, and I realized something. Whatever was in that room, it had been waiting for me. I backed away from the door, but the crypt seemed to shrink. The shadows pressed closer. My flashlight finally gave up its last flicker and died in my hand. I was left with nothing but the pounding of my heart and the rustle of chains behind me. Then I heard it breathe. Something massive stirred on the other side of the door. Not a child, not even close. Its breathing was guttural and uneven, like lungs full of ash. I pressed my back against the opposite wall, trying to disappear into the stone. Knock, 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 again. This time the sound wasn't just loud, it was wet, as if whatever knocked had flesh too soft, too rotten. The chains groaned. A sudden gust of freezing air swept through the crypt, and with it came a scent that nearly made me gag. Burned hair, sulfur, mold. The air vibrated, not with noise, but presence, like something ancient had just noticed me for the first time. "Elliot," it said again. But this time the voice came from within me, like it had bypassed my ears entirely. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head. The pressure was unbearable, like a claw digging into my brain. "Do you remember the rules?" My childhood came flooding back in jagged flashes. Us kids in the manor, running through the halls, daring each other to go deeper. That final game of hide and seek, the door we weren't supposed to open, the thing we accidentally let out, and the voice. It had promised not to hurt us. If we played, that's why we sealed the room. That's why we made a pact to forget. But something always remembered. Something never left. I stumbled to my feet, fighting the whisper inside my skull. There had to be a way out, a way to end it. Then I noticed it, a small gap in the far wall. Not a door, just a crack. I squeezed through, scraping my shoulders against stone, and tumbled into a narrow stairwell that spiraled downward into darkness. The whisper followed me, laughing now. "Running means nothing. You're still it." I gritted my teeth and descended, step by step, deeper than I'd ever gone as a child. At the bottom was a room, not forgotten, not sealed, but waiting, lit by dozens of flickering candles, arranged in a perfect circle. And in the center, a mirror, tall, framed in twisted bone, covered in dust. I approached it. My reflection didn't move. The reflection stared at me with unblinking eyes. Same face, same clothes, but not me. It was too still, too perfect. No rise or fall of breath, no flicker in the pupils, like a wax figure mimicking my existence. I raised a hand slowly. The reflection didn't move. My stomach turned cold. Then it smiled. Not my smile. Something older, stretched and hungry. Teeth too many, gums too black. Its eyes darkened to voids that pulled at my soul like a vacuum. And in the quiet, it whispered without moving its lips. "We switched a long time ago, Elliot." The candles around the room dimmed, then flared with sudden force, casting shadows that danced like specters. Behind me, the stone wall shifted. I turned sharply, but there was nothing. When I faced the mirror again, the image had changed. Now it showed a younger me, 8, maybe 9, standing in front of this same mirror. Mouth open, eyes wide. And behind child me, visible only in the reflection, stood the thing. Tall, shadowed, a silhouette with crooked limbs and a face made of holes. It loomed over my younger self with hands of ash and smoke. Its long fingers hovered over my head like a puppet master, ready to claim its string. I stumbled back, and the mirror cracked, just a thin, splintering line across its center. A sound like laughter rang out, but warped and metallic, like a broken music box trying to mimic joy. The mirror pulsed again, and now showed the other children, the ones who never left, huddled in corners of rooms I didn't recognize. Eyes hollow, skin grayed, all of them whispering in unison, "Let us go, Elliot." I stepped forward, drawn by something deeper than logic. I reached toward glass, and the cracks spread like lightning across the surface. My fingers touched the mirror, and it was warm. Alive. It rippled under my skin like flesh. Suddenly, hands burst through the glass, clawing at me, pulling, dragging. Dozens of tiny fingers. Doll hands, child hands, shadow hands. They gripped with fury and desperation. I screamed, tearing away as shards slashed across my chest. The mirror shattered with a deafening shriek. The candlelight died, and everything was black. Then came the sound. From behind me. From inside me. A single whisper, spoken with absolute finality. Now we're the same. I don't remember collapsing, but when I opened my eyes, I was lying on the cold floor, surrounded by mirror shards, their jagged edges still twitching as if alive. My chest burned where the glass had cut through me. Blood had soaked into my shirt, but the pain was distant, muted, like I wasn't fully there anymore. Something had changed. The air was thicker now, wrong. It hummed with an unnatural vibration, like the whole world was running just a fraction of a second behind. I stood shakily, my ears ringing, my body trembling. And then I saw it. The mirror no longer reflected anything. It had become a window. On the other side, a version of the room, identical in shape and size, but inverted. The candles burned black. The floor rippled like tar. And in the center of the room, where I had stood just moments ago, was me. But this version of me didn't move like a human. It twitched, glitched. Its eyes locked onto mine and held them. Then slowly other versions began to crawl into view. Children, dozens, twisted, distorted, their mouths sewn shut or stretched too wide. Some walked on all fours, some floated, head down, feet up, like broken marionettes. And they watched. The other Elliot smiled, then lifted a hand. Behind the mirror, behind the glass, I saw cracks spreading. On my side. As if the barrier between our worlds wasn't just damaged, it was giving in. Panicked, I backed away. The voices returned, rising in pitch and urgency. You broke the rule. You're not supposed to see. Now it's open. Now we're free. My flashlight, long dead, suddenly sparked to life in my pocket. I yanked it out. The beam shot straight into the mirror and the creatures recoiled. Screamed. The fake Elliot clutched its head and melted, face first, into the blackened floor. Then the mirror began to bleed. Dark, thick fluid poured from the cracks and slithered across the floor toward me. I bolted for the stairs, tripping on the first step, scrambling up, flashlight shaking in my hand. The stone corridor twisted as I ran, changing behind me, groaning with rage. At the top, a wooden door stood ajar. It hadn't been there before. No symbols, no chains, just waiting. I opened it and stepped into a hallway I remembered far too well. The second floor of the manor. The one place I swore I'd never go again. At the end of the hall, the door to the forgotten room. Only now, it was wide open. The door to the forgotten room stood wide, as if it had been waiting for me all along. But it wasn't like before. The wallpaper around it peeled in long, curling strips, revealing flesh-colored insulation that moved, pulsing like it had veins. The wooden floorboards beneath my feet creaked not from age but from resistance, as if I were stepping on something trying to wake up. I should have turned and run. Instead, I stepped inside. The room was untouched by time. Same velvet curtains, same arched windows. Dust hung in the air like cobwebs in mid-collapse. But the center, that's where everything was different. The game board was still there. A circle of broken toys arranged in a ritual pattern, dolls with missing eyes, cars with wheels snapped off, a jack-in-the-box that twitched though no one had wound it. In the middle, a small wooden box sat open. Empty, but not forgotten. That box had once held the object we'd used to summon the Seeker. Just a game, we thought. A made-up ritual passed down from kids before us. We thought the box was the prize, but it had always been the bait. The air shifted, thick with memories, laughter, screams. My own voice, younger, saying, "It's just pretend." I approached the box, my feet dragging, and then behind me, a whisper. Your turn to hide. I turned fast. Standing in the corner was the shadow, tall, boneless, grinning. Its face was a writhing blur, as if made from everyone it had ever found. And its fingers, they reached. I stumbled backward, crashing into the toy circle. The jack-in-the-box snapped open, playing its haunting tune. As it did, the toys began to move, each one turning its broken gaze toward me, limbs twitching unnaturally. The room groaned, and the door slammed shut behind me. The shadow stepped forward. I screamed, not out loud but inside my head, as it pressed its formless face close to mine. No breath, no eyes, just that sound, the wet grinding of teeth that didn't exist. Then it whispered, "They hid too long, Elliot. Now they're part of me." I looked around in horror. The toys! They weren't just objects. They were the others, the children, the ones who never left, their souls trapped inside playthings, cursed to keep playing the game, forever. The shadow raised a finger and pointed to the corner. A new toy sat there now, a small stuffed rabbit, with my face. I couldn't move. My heart raced and my body felt like it was made of stone. The room was pressing in on me, the walls bending like a pressure cooker ready to explode. I didn't want to look at it, the stuffed rabbit, but my eyes refused to obey. Slowly, my gaze shifted to the corner. The toy stared back at me. It was me, but not the way I look now. It was a version of me from years ago, when I was a child, dressed in the same faded pajamas I wore the night I had first entered this room. But something was horribly wrong. Its eyes were wide, empty, as though all life had been drained out of them. Its stitched mouth curved upward in a grotesque, mocking smile, as if it had been waiting there for eternity, waiting for me to notice. "We've been waiting," it whispered, in a voice that wasn't mine, but sounded like a twisted version of it. "Do you remember the rules?" The shadow behind me stirred, its presence growing larger. I could feel it, pressing against my back, its energy crawling over my skin, making every hair stand on end. The stuffed rabbit's stitched smile widened, impossibly wide, as the shadow's voice took over. "You've broken them, Elliot. The rules have always been clear." I felt my body tense, a cold sweat coating my skin. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The shadow was suffocating me, filling my lungs with its foul, rotten breath. Hide, seek, never stop playing. Suddenly, the room seemed to shift. The floor beneath me twisted, and I was falling. Not down, but in. The walls stretched and warped, expanding into endless space. I tumbled through darkness, but there was no floor, no ceiling. It was like falling through time itself, spiraling into some dark, ancient void. The whispering voices of the children surrounded me, echoing in a chorus of desperation. "Let us out. You have to finish. We never got to play." And then, just as suddenly, I landed, back in the room. But it wasn't the same. The walls were now covered with drawings, childish scribbles, yes, but they were too real. They bled into the wallpaper, as though they were part of the room itself, its veins made of ink and fear. The figures were twisted. They looked like us, me and the others, but distorted, hunched, with hollow eyes and mouths wide open. The toys had multiplied. Each one now had its own twisted face. Some were animals, some were human, some were things I couldn't even name. And in the center of the room, there was a chair. It looked like the one I'd sat in as a child when the game had begun. The chair that we had used to play. The shadow, now fully solid, stood beside it, watching me with an expression that wasn't quite joy. It was hunger, the kind of hunger that never ends. It pointed to the chair. "Your turn," it said. "You're the last one. The game ends with you." I stumbled forward, my legs shaking, my mind screaming in denial. But there was no escaping the room. No escaping the game. In the moment I sat down, the walls closed in. The moment I sank into the chair, I felt it. The cold, hollow weight of inevitability pressing down on me. The air around me grew thick with something viscous, like the very room itself was breathing. The shadow loomed at the edge of my vision, its outline flickering. Too fast, too wrong. Its mouth opened, though no words came. The toys, the drawings, the twisted echoes of the other children. They were all alive now, reaching out with their broken limbs and glassy eyes. The room was no longer just a place. It was a prison, a holding cell for all the souls who had lost their way, the forgotten, the abandoned. "It's your turn now," the shadow repeated, its voice echoing around me. I could feel it. The game was starting again. It had never truly stopped. I had thought I was just a visitor in this cursed space, but now I understood. I was always meant to play, just like the others, just like the first ones. The chair creaked beneath me. My body screamed for escape, but there was no way out, no exit. The walls closed in, not physically, but in my mind, closing the path to any hope of freedom. The room, the shadow, the whispers, they all seemed to pulse in unison, a terrible rhythm that was as old as time itself. The toys began to move again. The rabbit, the one that was me, hopped forward first. Its stitched mouth opened wider, as if to speak, but instead its tiny body split open, and darkness spilled out. The shadow at the edge of the room seemed to grow, pulling the blackness into itself, feeding on it. The sound of scratching grew louder as more and more toys came alive. I heard the small voices of children, faint but unmistakable, calling out from within them. "Elliot, help us! It's your turn to hide! Hide! Hide!" I looked around frantically, but the room had changed again. It was no longer a place I recognized. It was an endless maze of corridors, all leading back to the chair I sat in. Every wall, every corner, every door twisted and stretched out of reality. The toys were scattered throughout the hallways, standing, waiting, watching. "It's your turn to play," the shadow whispered. "Hide or seek." The final words hung in the air, and I realized the terrible truth. There was no end. The game would never stop. No matter how many times I ran, no matter how many times I tried to escape, the room would find me again. I would always be the seeker, and it would always be my turn to hide. As the room closed in around me, I could feel the dark pulling at my soul, dragging me into the never-ending void, and I knew deep down that I wasn't the last to play. There were others. And the forgotten room would never forget.